Okay, so this is not just going to be any normal rant about YouTube Rewind. So, in this podcast, I'm going to be talking about what YouTube Rewind represents and why I'm not going to Peru, partially because of YouTube Rewind, not directly because of YouTube Rewind, but it's there. So, let's get started. So, let me start this all from the beginning. It'll make a lot more sense. So, about week and a half ago, I booked for winter break a trip to Peru, to a city or a town called Iquitos, depending what you call a city. Now, from there, my plan was to do an eco lodge, and then from that eco lodge, which I have linked below, but I canceled that and I canceled my flight because then I realized that this lodge was not all what I was expecting. There was a level of sketchiness with that lodge. So with that in mind, I decided the best thing to do was to just dump the whole thing. So I dumped the whole trip, which stay tuned for later podcasts because that means I'll have flight credit for another time. But it was still paid money. It was not a cheap life lesson. But let me put another scenario then. So you have this best friend. This guy you trust with your life. He went to, say, a country like Somalia, which I don't know why you'd ever want to go there, but that's beside the point. Say he'd been to Somalia and he did it as a traveling trip and he saw all these things that are like, yeah, so I saw this, I had a good time here, it was great, fantastic, the nightlife for whatever reason, I don't know why in Somalia would be spectacular, but it was spectacular. And then the problem that you have there is that you then go to then what happens is you have but then in the background of that, essentially you have like a heavy murder going on or something bad is happening in the background, but he doesn't tell you anything about that. Even though he was probably in dead witness to it. He was just telling you the good parts of that trip. That is kind of what influence has become. And now is where the fun of dumping on the YouTube Rewind is. And let me make this clear. I'm not going to do a normal rant about like how YouTube Rewind was a piece of garbage this year, but as much fun as that would be, because there are so many other things I could talk about in YouTube Rewind that other people are probably also going to be talking about, and I would have no problem shitting all over that. That is not the problem. There's plenty of content. I could do a whole hour podcast on that. But the problem that you have is you have groups, or you take YouTube Rewind it's a good example of this. They show, oh, look how nice and fluffy each one of these cultures are when they all sit around that campfire that everyone started hating. Like that's the part of the video that everyone's going to hate to the max. And if you've seen the dislike ratio on this thing, it's incredible. So at that campfire, you're like, oh yeah, let's take a shout out to all these different cultures. But then you then don't realize that they're showing you the fluff. They're showing you the good stuff about each one of those cultures. They're showing you the 5 guys. Now, don't get me wrong. There could be several other people that are great people in each one of those cultures. Like, there could be multiple. But they're showing you, like, here's the pie of set culture. They could be showing you a tiny sliver at that campfire. They could be showing you, like, the best quality sliver. Like, you got the best piece of that pumpkin pie, and no one else, and everyone else just got, like, that weird floppy crust and that garbage. That could be what they're showing you. And now, don't get me wrong. I have seen this in action. I used to volunteer in an aquarium, and you would see different, and it's a Santa Monica Pier, so you get a lot of tourists. So you see a lot of different people from all over the world walk in and out of this aquarium. I spoke with people from New Zealand, from Australia, Japan, India, all over at this aquarium. Ask anyone who's been there for 3 years. I've been there, and they will know that you can get anyone from anywhere. And when you do that, I was having fun paying attention as to who you most often get. So what I mean by that is the following. You would get a lot of people in different groups of categories of tourists that would exist a lot more, and it would tell you about the culture they're from. Because a culture that thrives is one that has such a luxury that you can go travel around the world and go to a place like this, like the Santa Monica Pier. Versus most of the world does not actually get a chance to go do that. So that goes back to my original point. My point being on this is, say now here becomes the horrible scenario in this. What happens if, going back to that example of your friend that tells you Somalia is a great country, though I don't know why he would ever say that, but say he's been to Somalia, he's like, oh yeah, I had a great time there, it was a great trip, even though guys were robbing each other and pickpockets in the background and shooting each other, but he never mentioned any of that. So what I'm going to say is the following. Essentially what becomes is, now what happens if you travel there and God forbid something happens to you on that trip? That is where shit hits the fan. It's all fun and games until someone actually gets hurt. I don't care if it's two people roughhousing in their own house, or if it's you go across the world and you go to a country that you're not prepared for and you don't know what to expect. Now, granted, I was partly guilty of booking that Peru trip, but part of the problem also became the fact of you have such a culture that promotes and says all these other cultures are nice, so and fluffy, and they're cute sunshine and rainbows and bunnies and everything, when really that is the eighth of that, or that sliver of that pumpkin pie that actually is the good piece. Then everyone else gets stuck with the floppy fucking crust or some other horrible part of the pie. I don't care whether you want to use a fruit pie, pumpkin pie for that example. I don't care. But essentially what happens is someone, God forbid, travels to a place, is under the influence that, oh, this is going to be a great time, this is going to be great everything, it's going to be a great trip. And then something happens to him. Like he gets pickpocket, like anything from like pickpocketing to getting killed or anywhere in between. God forbid any of that happens. So with that in mind, what I'm going to say is the following. If you are a heavy influencer that talks about different cultures, that talks about different philosophies in different countries of the world, show both sides of the coin, and you will actually make it safer for travelers like myself and everyone else on this platform who wants to get out there and see the world. Thank you, and have a great day.